Welcome to the Right Side on Blog Talk Radio. This is your host, Dave Nathan. Welcome, all of you listeners. Happy to have you tune in. I'm reminding you that this is a live call-in show, so after we've spoken for about an hour to our guests, I'd love to have you folks call in with any questions or comments or observations that you feel like I may have, some questions I may have not asked that you would like to know about. And if you're in the chat room and you have questions and you don't want to get on the air, feel free to post your question, and that question will get to me, and I'll be able to ask it of our guest. Today's quote is, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society," and that's J. Krishnamurti. It's one of my favorite quotes. It makes me feel good because I have a hard time sometimes dealing with this quote-unquote three-dimensional reality that we live in. It seems really out of sorts. And I wonder, gee, well, there's something wrong with me because I can't seem to fit in, and do what quote-unquote normal people do. And when I first heard that quote and read it, I was like, wow, okay, maybe I can relax a little bit. So I hope you folks out there can relax a little bit too. Those of you who feel like, you're outside of the box, you're not on the beaten path, you're trying to put it all together. The society that we live in isn't working. Black is white and up is down, and right is wrong, and these issues are being forced on people daily, and so people are really living upside down. They're living in a twisted world, and so you don't have to really feel that you have to really fit in with that and be a part of it, and that makes you normal, because apparently it really doesn't. Certainly doesn't make anybody feel normal. Interestingly enough, here in New York, too, another quick thing, somebody posted on Facebook that they watched this plane riding in the sky. So a plane was writing "last chance." Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's connected to the Occupy Wall Street. I don't know who's paying for that, and I don't know what's the last chance they were talking about, but boy, is that a sign in the heavens. And lastly, Occupy Wall Street, I went down this past Saturday, and I'd gone down a couple of Saturdays ago. It was really, really crowded this past Saturday, and that everybody still wasn't there. Some folks were still marching. You had your drummers at one end, you had your soapbox at the other end. There was an open mic in the middle. There's food for people. There's clothing for people. People are camped out. People are talking about important issues that are affecting us all. And for those of you who may not be aware, in over 1,000 cities in this country, people are occupying. People are saying, there's enough. Now, I understand that, the mainstream media might say one thing about it. They're going to try, obviously, to label these people as kooks and young people who don't have a job. There were a lot of people down there who were veterans, people in suits, older people. So it's everybody. It's people that are it's really the mass awakening of the human race. That's what all of this is. It's going to happen. It's got to happen. It's inevitable, and it's happening. So, even though there are going to be those who are going to try to co-opt the movement, or who are going to try to claim some kind of success, and even though there may be people that are plants and people that are involved in the movement that may not be actually sincere, it doesn't matter. The movement really is arising out of the heart of the people and arising out of our need for change in this world. And to tie this into what I said earlier, it's a profoundly sick society. And one of the sicknesses, one of the manifestations of that sickness is that we don't really know reality. We don't. We think we know it, but we just get this tiny little slice that we live in. And unfortunately, that tiny little slice doesn't tell us anything about who we are, where we're going, where we came from, and all the potential that we have. So today's guest actually really helped to open my mind to a little bit more of what reality was about, or what reality could be about, for sure. And I'm really happy that we have him on today. Let me get to you and let me tell you a little bit about who he is. I'm sure you're tuning in to hear him, and we're going to get to him. His name is Peter Moon. Peter was born in San Fernando, California. He became interested in creative writing, science fiction, and science during his high school years. This led to an interest in Eastern religion and Western occultism, which culminated in a unique association that centered around the private concerns of L. Ron Hubbard, the controversial founder of Genetics and Scientology. Peter is the publisher of the Montauk Project book series, which you can find out more about at skybookusa.com. And in 1992, he co-authored the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time with Preston Nichols, which is a summary of Preston's accumulated knowledge and research based on his experiments or his experiences from working at the secret installation at Montauk Air Force Station located in Montauk, New York. The Montauk Project refers to a mixture of legends and actual scientific experiments that occurred in the wake of the 1943 Philadelphia experiment. And the spectacular nature of these experiments and their natural development eventually led to a manipulation of matter and the penetration of time itself. And some of this technology was said to be derived with ET assistance. Peter's research led him to discover that these time travel experiments occurred on ground that was sacred to the Montauk Indians, a tribe which had been the victim of genocide and which was viciously and inaccurately declared as extinct. Peter also discovered that this ground had once housed actual sacred pyramids. Peter's most recent book is Transylvanian Moonrise, which is now both available in hard copy and ebook. And again, this is really fantastic, but this book concerns the discovery of the most amazing archaeological artifact in the history of mankind, which is a chamber that contains a holographic record of the Earth's history, as well as holographic readouts of human DNA and also other species. This mysterious chamber also contains tunnels leading to secret locations beneath the Earth, as well as other unimaginable technology. So, and that's that was long, wasn't it? You know, that's because there's just so much here and so much that we're trying to tell you about our guest. Peter, thank you for being on the show.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. All right, so let's start the ending first, and then let's move backward a little bit. Let's start with your latest book, Transylvanian Moonrise, because I'm really kind of, I'm already fascinated by what it has to say. How did you get onto that topic? How did you get from Montauk to Transylvania of all places?
Well, just to be accurate, there's two books, Transylvanian Sunrise and Transylvanian Moonrise. They're the last two books, and Sunrise is the one that talks about the chamber beneath the Romanian Sphinx. There's a Sphinx in Romania, and beneath this there is according to the primary author, Radu, he has witnessed a holographic chamber hall of records there. And of course, the Moonrise goes one step beyond that. But but basically, to answer your question, how do we get from Montauk to Transylvania? Well, what makes the Montauk, what enabled me to become a recognized author and a popular author to some extent was the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time. And this is based upon the work and summarization, as you said in the prologue, of Preston Nichols, who was a scientist, is a scientist, he's still alive, and had all these strange experiences at Montauk Point. He began to interview people, and he'd never been to Montauk in his ordinary reality, but people would recognize him from Montauk, and he began to look into things, and he was also a genius in radio frequency and all things electromagnetic. So he put this story together called the Montauk Project, but as I wrote that book, and with him, because I'm a writer, he's not really a writer, and when we began to have monthly meetings on Long Island, we had a monthly Montauk night. One day a man showed up, Dr. David Anderson. He was a time scientist as well, but he's like what you call a latter-day generation of time science. And Preston's sort of days were kind of over at Montauk, so to speak. I mean, he still has strange experiences, but Montauk lasted from the 70s to about 1983, the main project that's talked about in the book. Now, David Anderson met me and Preston on August 11th, 1999, the anniversary of the biorhythm of the Montauk Project, which occurs August 12th, or 2 days on either side. He comes in on August 11th, 1999, and meets us, and he's got a time travel research center on Long Island, and we don't know anything. We hadn't heard anything about it. So he introduced himself to me. He'd just gotten back from Romania, and he wanted to bring me to Romania. It took about 9 years for me to get to Romania. And in the process, I had my books published in Romania, which started a whole publishing house in Romania called Daksha Publishing. When the Montauk Project was published in Romania, an author by the name of Radu, who was had some secret liaisons with the government. He was not working for the government at that time. Submitted a manuscript, which is now called in English Transylvanian Sunrise, and that is how we get from Montauk to Romania and Transylvania. And
let me ask you quickly, what was it about your work that made him want to bring you to Romania?
Well, see, David is one of the most advanced scientists in the world. And he explained to me, you see, what he was doing, I mean, his physics will hold up with anyone's, and it will reach beyond anyone's in your universities. And it can be embarrassing to people who've studied their whole life and think they know things. Like if you watch Stephen Hawking, he's like, you know, changed his position so many times that a rational person doesn't give him any credibility. Yet he is still this esteemed figure, you know. And I've never changed my position on time travel in 20 years. I've never had to. And my basic position is that, yes, it's possible. You know, I'm not making assertions here, but I'm not hardwired into theories that don't work. So what I'm saying is a scientific mind's not going to take Stephen Hawking seriously anymore. And yet, you know, he has all this admiration, which is less in the scientific world. But see, David was incredibly brilliant. But what attracted him to me, in particular me, is that I had an open mind. And when it was obvious from reading the books that I'd written, that he read everything he could on time travel, and he read the books that I'd written and published, and he was impressed by the fact that I had an open mind and was a conduit to recognize and explain his research, because for all of the, you know, I mean, there's not, you know, I'm very unique. I mean, you know, I'm not the only one that's written about time travel for sure.
Right.
But I'm very unique in the, you know, in the world as far as what I do and what I've written about, and it's so David recognized that. He liked my writing very much, and I think he also has some agenda for me in terms of helping to promote his work. He, you know, I mean, obviously I've covered him in my newsletter. I have a quarterly newsletter which has had some very interesting articles about him and the time. Now, I mean, it's evolved to the point now where his time control technology will handle all the Earth's energy problems with very inexpensively. We've got a lot of technology on this Earth that will handle. We you know, I mean, you can put the whole world on solar for you know, $10 billion or something, or at least the United States, and solve all our energy problems. It's the political will to do it that is hard, and all the infrastructure that will, you know, collapse or go ape in the process. But anyway, this is why he was interested in me, and I believe there's some unspoken agendas he has for me that he might even see through his time research. I don't know, but that's just an intuition on my part.
What is the title, Transylvanian Sunrise? What is that? What is that sunrise indicator of? You know, what's
well, Transylvanian Sunrise is a title I put on the book because the original title was not too impressive. It was called The Enemy Within, which refers to Romania. The Enemy Within Romania. And then that title never saw the Romanian edition. They changed it to something that's called Death's Head. And that doesn't really resonate with, you know, what the book is about, and it's certainly in English. And so I picked the title Transylvanian Sunrise because, you know, the book starts off in Transylvania, my first it actually has my first adventure into Transylvania, which we're actually going into. Romania is divided into two main provinces: Wallachia, which is the south, where Count Dracula was from, and Transylvania, which is far more well known to people. And we were there in the middle of the night, headed straight. I mean, we ended up by happenstance to go to Transylvania, which was just kind of strange, and up into the mountains, and because they couldn't find a room for us, our room had been sold out when we arrived at 2 in the morning. So it was a harrowing adventure. So, but the title Transylvanian Sunrise is symbolic of the exorcism of the negative energy or the vampire, because the vampire does not like the sunlight, and he leaves in sunrise. So this is, a Romania, which is a country that's been sort of stereotyped with vampires and Dracula and all that. It's kind of reversing the energy, and this is a new hope for mankind. And it's, as I say, this is the most incredible discovery in the history of mankind, or the most alleged incredible discovery.
Let me ask you.
Believe it. It's an alleged incredible discovery.
Right. Now, you have not seen this with your own eyes.
No, I have not. I have talked to many people in Romania who will tell me that it is real, because they've talked to so many people who know, or they know circumstances themselves. And the second book, Transylvanian Moonrise, gives a lot of what you call journalistic corroboration by the Romanian press, which has now been translated into English. I was just there this last summer, and I was told by a man that in the area near the Sphinx, there was all these, like, Americans going to this little town of Bușteni, which is you go to Bușteni if you want to go take the cable car to the Sphinx. But, there's no reason for massive amounts of Americans to be in the hotels. He also told me the hotel personnel were told to, keep it quiet.
Oh, hold on, there's a Sphinx in Romania?
Yes, there's a Sphinx in Romania, and if you go, yes, it's like near this little town called Bușteni. It's a mountain village. It's very nice there, and you take a cable car, which is built in the 70s during the communist regime, and you take the cable car up, and you walk less than 100 yards, and you'll see this rock edifice, which they say is some 50,000 years old. And some people will say it's shaped by wind. I have a picture on the cover and inside. It's shaped by wind, shaped by erosion, but if you stand at certain perspectives, you can't deny that it's a Sphinx. And of course, if you've been around Eastern Europe a lot and gone to the sacred sites, which I have in Bulgaria, you begin to see that there is a pattern in nature. When you get to these sacred sites with ruins and whatnot, you see that they're often by these edifices and you're sitting there, well, is this a man or is this the wind? Is this an animal or is this the wind? And it seemed that these ancient proto-Thracians, Thracians are the people that the Trojans come from. Same word, Trojans, Thracians. It's just a different phonetic application. But the proto-Thracians, the people that come back from they were highly evolved, and they were playing games with stones and playing games with design of sculpting rock. And so it smacks of this. There's also a different megaliths around there. One is called Batale, which means old women, and that means, or gate. And that is, in between that and the Sphinx, underneath the ground is where this chamber is supposed to be. There's also a large military installation nearby, which protects this secret, I guess we'd call it alpha base, near there, where a lot of the collaboration between Romanian and American troops exists.
Has there been a lot of UFO activity over this spot or anything like that in terms of the paranormal?
Yes, and I will tell you, not so much to my knowledge at that particular location, which is a very sacred location in ancient Romanian history and in current Romanian esoteric people, but where this year, and I wrote about it in my recent newsletter, if you look at the Sphinx, it faces north. Then there's two big rock formations which are called doorways. I didn't know this the first time I went there.
Mm-hmm.
And the doorways go down, if you follow them, they go down a mountain. And I went down the mountain taking a cable car with some of my friends from Romania and Bulgaria, and we went down into a cave. And this is the most remarkable cave I've ever been in. I haven't been to the caves in New Mexico or Kentucky, but this cave was huge. You walk in, and it's got a monastery built in front of it. You can walk into the cave, of course. They got lights, and it's not dangerous to walk in there, but it's like a whole amphitheater. It's huge. And then it goes small, and you walk in, and you have to. I'm over 6 feet, so I had to kind of get down at a few places. But then it opens up again into bigger chasms and caverns, and you go up these steps that they've built in wooden places until you finally. I figured I was in about a quarter of a mile or so, and when finally you get there's like underground lake waterways and lakes and little lake, and then you go into a spot you can't go any further. But the cave keeps going, and the reason you can't go is because they can't really build walkways there. It's a little hard, so you could go in if you were like, had the right clothing and stepping around the stones. And I talked to one of my new friends who I made there, and he said that he's gone past that at least 80 yards with planks and with lighting equipment. And he says, you go about 80 yards, and he says, you can keep going, but you don't have, he didn't have the right equipment. He needed spelunking equipment, which he didn't have. Now, basically, the theory and the obviousness of this goes into the inner earth. And the inner earth, it's like an endless, Now, the inner earth is a big thing when it comes to the theory of UFOs, but particularly in Romania, because this whole Transylvanian Alps, this is the first place I ever was in Romania, the Alps, they go from east to west. And that's the southern border of Transylvania. And they have a lot of UFOs over those regions that are said to go right into the inner earth. And this is like the biggest state secret in Romania, so I'm told. It's not even this chamber I'm talking about. It's this UFO activity that comes from these beings in the inner earth. And this is I was told this by a special person over there. It's not my assertion, it's their assertion, and this is stuff that just cannot be talked about. My author won't even talk about it. And they're so to answer your question, this is where the UFOs are. They would be a little to the west of this area.
Okay. So are you one of those folks, are you a believer in the hollow earth theory then, that there is civilization underneath in the center of the earth?
Well, I've never met anybody from there, so I can't say that I'm a believer, but I'm by no means a disbeliever. I'm not in a position to pass judgment on these theories, nor are most people. See, it's like we can't go into denial, It's like, and this is one of the problems with scientists. They have closed minds. And therefore they're not really scientists. They're something else. So the theories of the hollow earth go back. You can find it in the congressional record where they were trying to fund. I think Andrew Jackson put the kibosh on it. But they were actually trying to raise money to go into the hollow earth. Because it wasn't a question of whether it existed. It was a question of exploring it.
Oh.
And whether there are beings there, these go back into secret societies, back to the days of Edward Bulliar Lytton, who wrote the book The Coming Race, about the Vril or the Vrilya, which were inner earth beings. So this is Tibet, Bulgaria, they have ancient inner earth traditions there that are recognized. So it's kind of like, it's long more been recognized than the precepts of Judaism and Christianity, which we know of here. So there's a very long tradition. If you talk to Native American people, oh yeah, they can tell you all about inner earth people, and there's quite a lot of substantiation or corroboration of it. So I would tend to vote for them rather than against them.
Wow, that's really pretty interesting. Now, to stay on the subject of Romania for a minute, because my geography is failing me for a minute now. But that is in the vicinity of Eastern Europe, where Bosnia is located as well, right?
Yes,
are they close
east
by?
Of Bosnia. It's east of Bosnia, where the Bosnian pyramid is.
Right,
and
right.
There's that whole Bosnian thing, which they keep uncovering things. It's like this is ancient. They're digging up this mountain, and digging up the hillside, and the more they dig, the more they find. They're digging up Egypt. You see, civilization is built upon civilization is built upon civilization, and there's ancient civilizations in Romania as well. It just costs an arm and a leg more to dig these things up. So they surface slowly. Like Troy, they found at least 4 cities where Troy is supposed to be. And there's probably many more under that, and they keep finding them older and older. But Romania is east of Bosnia.
Bosnia. All this information that they're finding and that's going on? Obviously, if it were not for people like you and maybe Dr. Anderson and a few other people, we wouldn't even know about this. I mean, how much do we not know? And when is this information going to become more common knowledge for people to understand?
Well, right now we're in what's called the information age, and while the stuff I write about is unique, there's a lot of other people writing about a lot of other unique things. And there's so much information being spouted out. We have an information challenge, if not a crisis, as far as figuring out what information is relevant and what is not relevant. And it's like this is the time when secrets are over. So the secrets are over. It's a question of, but you don't have time to process them all, and there's so much stuff on the media that's just so wasting of your time. And, so I guess it's just the times we're living in, and it's symptomatic. When this first story, the Montauk story broke in the 1980s, it actually broke. By the time I found out about it was 1990. But it was like, when we sat in those meetings with like less than 20 people, you felt like the freedom to assemble was going to be repealed any minute. I mean, the tension in the air was so thick when they talked about this stuff. Now it's been on the radio, it's been on television. It's going to be, I'm doing a segment with Jesse Ventura's show, which will air in probably January, on time travel. So it's like, it's kind of getting into the mainstream after 20 years. But in those old days, it was like, you felt like...
you had to watch your back, yeah.
Like the men in black were going to come in and have us all arrested by the FBI or something. And there was nothing we were doing illegal, but you felt that sort of that original Boston Tea Party intrigue, and those were the times. That was the beginning, and I picked up on it, and not only seized the opportunity, but I realized it was my life's work. The first time I walked out of that building after hearing all this stuff, I something ran through my head, said, this is why I came to Long Island.
Yeah, yeah. That could be because, I mean, you've been really prolific in writing since then. I mean, how many books are there in the Montauk series?
Well, everything is kind of centered around Montauk, so I mean, I don't really know what the Montauk series is. I've published 17 books since 1992, and I've co-authored most of them. I've edited all of them. I think I have 2 books by Stuart Swerdlow and 2 other books, Alexandra Bruce, Philadelphia Experiment Murder, and Wade Gordon, Brookhaven Connection, that I did not author, but I edited them and participated heavily in them.
Okay. That's
17 books.
Yeah, yeah, you're really up in the knowledge. Let's go back again just briefly, and before we move on from Transylvania, the Moonrise. What's the distinction again between the Moonrise and the Sunrise books?
Well, the Moonrise is actually, I mean, I contributed to that book, but if I take the part I did not write, it's the best book I've ever read.
Okay.
You know, I think that it's a book that picks up where the author, because although I've talked about, you know, I haven't talked about what's in the book. That book, Transylvania Sunrise, is all about how Radu Sinamar gets pulled in to write this story about this incredible discovery and this incredible find. And when he gets into that chamber, he sees these incredible devices that can read out his DNA and read out the DNA of alien species in holographic projections. Includes a holographic projection of history of the world that is bioresonant. The history he sees will be different than the history you see or that I see. It's also a summarized history, as if you were watching the History Channel, and it's all kind of like, you know, fit together. Now, there's 3 tunnels in that which go to 3 different locations. One goes to Tibet, where there's a similar installation with 2 side tunnels, one that goes to Mongolia with a smaller but somewhat similar installation, and another one that goes to Baghdad, the area of Baghdad. Then there's another tunnel that goes to the Giza Plateau, underneath the Giza Plateau, and there's a third tunnel which goes into the inner earth. Though exploration of one of those tunnels takes place in the 3rd book, which is only partly translated right now. That's the Mystery of Egypt. The 2nd book doesn't really deal with that, the Transylvanian Moonrise book. This deals with Radu being contacted by a mysterious character who says that a Tibetan lama wants to meet him. And when he hears that the Tibetan lama wants to meet him, a meeting is set up in Bucharest where he will arrive at this mysterious character's house, who's an alchemist. And the alchemist, whose name is Eleanor, it's a male name it's a pseudonym, but it's a male name in Romania. Mm-hmm. Eleanor is an alchemist who looks like he's 30, but his driver's license says he's over 60. So this becomes a long discussion of this ancient tradition he's been initiated to by one of his ancestors who was like, you know, 700-800 years old.
Okay, hold it. This is a true story. This is not a legend.
Oh, yeah. It's a true story. It's presented as a true story. And this is one of the problems Radu says. People believe his stuff is science fiction. And he says it's not. He tells me this personally. But he said that, you know, but this also, the fact that the Romania accepts it as science fiction helps him write his books and be undisturbed. But he says very much, no. And alchemy, there's ancient alchemy traditions. See, nobody's really cracked the stone, the philosopher's stone on alchemy. And this is the first book to really kind of crack the code or pretend to crack the code or assert that it's cracking the code. Mm-hmm. Because he gives enough information to make you think that it's plausible that one could stay alive for a long time. You're not given the exact formulas, but he says it takes a very long time. And Eleanor has this incredible laboratory, alchemical laboratory in his basement, and he's worked on this for like great years of his life. And the whole purpose of living a long time is to evolve spiritually. It's not to amass a great fortune, which he has, that he's largely inherited, but he's using the money to, but it's also problematic because he says after so many years you've got to move because you can't stay too long in one place and look young. So he's constantly, but he's, as fascinating as this character is, he's only a go-between to the lama. He's a go-between and a facilitator to get him to meet the lama, and they meet the lama, and the lama has a strange character with him called a yidam, which is created through a sand mandala ritual at a certain level of lamaism, and the lama is there to facilitate protection and a teleportation from Transylvania to Tibet, okay? And where he meets a goddess, a blue goddess, with the blue people come from the inner earth. I've written about that many times. And the blue goddess gives him a manuscript which becomes book 4, which I've not read yet. So that's some of the bare bones of the book, which is utterly fascinating. Can I say it's all real? I can't prove it's all real, but it's the best book I've ever read.
Well, I mean, one of the things I've noticed about your writings, particularly in the Montauk, a couple of Montauk books, is that you do, you refer to some of the more harder to believe incidences as legend, and I always found that to be kind of appropriate because a legend is something that can be real, maybe it isn't, it kind of leaves it up to the reader sort of to really sort of decide what it is. And I mean, this is really, it sounds absolutely fascinating. I mean, and mind-opening and all of those things which I think are really important. Regardless, I mean, to just be able to think that some people are living life on that level, while the rest of us, plod it out and work and die, it's really pretty interesting. Now, you had also, one of your books also, because they're mentioning Tibet, one of your books also deals with a Nazi-Tibetan connection. Can you go into that just a little bit?
Well, that's The Black Sun. The Black Sun, it's the fourth book of the Montauk series, the fourth book about Montauk, Montauk's Nazi-Tibetan connection. Now, when there is literature on Nazis being connected to Tibet, which, I did not make that connection. That starts out with The Morning of the Magicians, which was written after the war, which goes into Karl Hausover, who was a Tibetan, a Bon priest or Bonpo priest, and he was the mentor of Rudolf Hess and to a lesser extent Hitler. He visited Hitler and Hess in that prison they were in. I can't remember it for some reason. Landsberg prison, I think it was called, when he was imprisoned for the Munich beer hall putsch in 1923. And so Hausover was a member of the Bavarian Illuminati, and he was a Tibetan priest. He was also a member of the Green Dragon Society in Japan. He was fluent in Japanese and Tibetan, and he was quite a remarkable individual. I mean, in terms of his scholarship and connections, he is, and he was like an occult mentor and founded the Thule Society, the Vril Society,
right,
and the Black Sun, which was the most secret society of the Nazis, and that's what the book is about. But it also, the Nazis were involved in Montauk. We had the biggest conclave of Nazis outside of Nazi Germany in Long Island, at Yaphank, Long Island, right next to Brookhaven Labs. And Brookhaven Labs had a very strong German connection. They were goose-stepping in the 30s on Long Island. Fritz Kuhn was the name of the Bund leader. And during the war, they were having strange meetings. I found out from a Montauk Indian who used to report them to the Congress, the police. And they would have these meetings with KKK habits, the big white conical thing, conical hat. Now, those are Tibetan hats, and they were called Bon meetings, B-O-N. Now, see, not Boon meetings, Bon meetings. This was during the war. During the war, those Nazis were moved out. What did you say?
So you're saying that during the war, there was literally an enclave of Nazis on Long Island?
No. Before the war, the Nazis were moved out. The property was all their property was confiscated by the alien property custodian. But after the Nazis were moved out, they were still having meetings on the Nazi ground, which were called Bon meetings. She did not know who the Bon were, what the Bon. Now, I recognize Bon as a Tibetan name from a Tibetan sect. Okay?
Okay.
B-O-N. The earlier version of Bon, it derives from Mon, M-O-N, which is like Mongol, Manchuria, and Montauk. But that's a different thread. But the Bon were originally called, but they were called the Bon, and these were being reported to the from the police, and this woman was a secretary to the police, and they were being reported to the House Un-American Activities Committee, and to the Congress, and nothing was done about these meetings. They were just being watched and spied on. But the Bonn meetings were, as they say, KKK dress, but in a Tibetan. These are Tibetan habits. Now, I don't know if there were Tibetans there I don't know what the hell was going on there. But I was very interested that the name Bon was related to Tibetan. I began to ask questions. Didn't get as many answers. I did eventually find two guys, one who was born of a German Nazi, and he used to attend Bon meetings in later day, in like the 80s or 90s, where they would meet and have weird stuff on aeronautical stuff. They were very private meetings with top scientists on Long Island that were of German extraction. And they were kind of UFO related and strange aereo technology.
So, go ahead, please.
So I'm saying is there was a legacy here, which I go into many different avenues of the Tibetan connection, the German, a lot of the things that have been told about Germany that's not true, a lot of the false information from the war, and also the I have some of the first flying saucers, so German flying saucers to appear in a book form in America. They weren't the first time Nazi UFOs had ever appeared in an America, but the first book that ever came out with them, I believe. So these they were given to me by a man who was given. They were given to him, and he published them in a book in Germany. And so they had the Vril Society used to have UFOs. They built flying saucers, which were quite technological, and this is sort of the forerunner of our American UFO movement, but it was all occurring in Germany. And now, this was controversial when I published, but it's all been documented. There was a mainstream guy, Nick Cook, who says, what's all this stuff talking about? It's crazy. And he went and, it's all been documented that they were doing strange flying craft. Mm-hmm. So, but see, the Nazis were very much active and interested in Montauk.
Why was that?
Well, it was a strategic point, number one, and they were also working with the Philadelphia experiment in the 30s. They were collaborating on the Philadelphia experiment in the 40s. When war broke out, there was still a connection there. So you had like a secret cabal of people that were very inside. So you had like German U-boat captains coming aboard or coming to Montauk and with their gold and just coming aboard and settling in Queens. And one of my friends told me that story. He knew of a U-boat captain. There was a lot of collaboration between the Nazis and the military during the war, or a certain amount of it, but it wasn't all collaboration. And Montauk was the core of it, because according to what I had learned from Preston, was that Montauk was a German outpost, and they had built these underground catacombs, underground bunkers.
It was a German outpost when? During what period of time?
Oh, the Kaiser Wilhelm. That's World War I, pre-World War I. There was a pan-Germanic movement to put Germans all over the place. The Nazis are on the heel of that. The Nazis are the Third Reich. The First Reich is I forget his name, the German king. But the and then you have your Second Reich, which kind of ends with what's his name, Kaiser Wilhelm.
Right.
It goes down the tubes. But I mean, the Germans were very territorialistic, and they needed living space, which they called Lebensraum, and so they were building. There was a lot of Germans out at Montauk back then, and so apparently, the old things die hard. Yeah. It's like Ireland was a big German outpost, and people don't realize that. And Ireland is a big connection to Montauk because they're not that far apart geographically. There's a lot of Irish at Montauk that come over on fishing boats, many of them illegally, to this day. And people don't realize that Ireland was neutral during the war, officially neutral. They were Catholic, and they hated the English, and they still do.
Let me ask you a question, though. I want to go back to something, and we can just touch on it briefly, and this is just of interest. But you said a lot of things were said about the Germans and the Nazis during the war that were not so. Extrapolate just a little bit, maybe just a couple of those things, just to sort of give us an idea of what you're talking about.
You know, they were portrayed as a aggressor nation, and they certainly were aggressive. But they don't go into the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles really hurt the Germans. It screwed the Germans. And when the way that treaty was conducted, the Germans did not lose World War I. There was a ceasefire. And they agreed to, cease fire. The military did. The military was not involved in negotiations, and they had all this huge war reparation debt. Now, World War I was not started by the Germans. World War I was started when the Archduke Ferdinand was shot in Sarajevo. And all these countries went, Russia says, well, I'll back down. Germans say, I'll go here. Austria says, I'll do this. And so everybody jumped in, except the Americans. They came late. But, so in other words, the Germans did not start World War I. It was started with the Black Hand. So the Germans weren't the aggressor nation in World War I. I mean, they chose one side, and they got such a bad deal in the Treaty of Versailles that it upset the population, and it bankrupted Germany, and they were having the wheelbarrow inflation. Now, the Germans, and even more so the Austrians, blamed the Jews, the Jewish bankers. Now, whether that was right or wrong, that it was the sentiment of Germany, and Austria, in particular Austria, which is where Hitler grew up. But Hitler did not become anti-Semitic until he even had a girl he admired who was Jewish, until he was even part Jewish himself, but until he saw that it was politically expedient to be that way. That was the way he was going to rise to power. Anti-Semitism exists long before, well, back into the Inquisition. I mean, anti-Semitism is prevalent, and Hitler is not the source of it, although he is often portrayed as the sole perpetrator of World War II. And he is, I wouldn't call him an innocent bystander, but he's put into that position to stir up trouble and stir up political agitation he's working in Army intelligence. So he's kind of sent in there, and then he's, I think he really starts to move when Rudolf Hess discovers him. And Rudolf Hess is from a very wealthy family, and he's connected to all sorts of, your Karl Hausover and everybody. Hess was the financier. I wrote another book about this Spandau mystery, which goes into Hess. Hess was the financier of the Nazi Party. He had all the money, all the access to the money, and that's why they kept him in Spandau prison for so long. He was a legal signatory to all that money. All that money that was either theirs or not theirs, depending on how you look at it, he was a signatory, and he had certain rights, and he was probably even legally a head of state because they never dissolved the. When Hitler took over Germany, he did everything in what you call diplomatically legal sense. Whether he did it was morally or honest or all that sort of thing, but he dotted all the I's and crossed the T's. And right now, Germany is an occupied country, and there's this kind of game they play. They don't have their own. The Third Reich was never dismantled, or in other words, the German people have a right to be their own people, but they're not, and they're sort of cool. And
occupied by who?
Occupied by the Allies who conquered them. And I've been to Germany. The Germans are very either brainwashed or they're very upset about the way things are, because it's not a German country. It's it's kind of like if the Russians came over here and let us be the way we are, but we really had to answer to them. It's kind of the way our country is now. In other words, we're occupied by people who do not follow the Constitution right now, and all this admiralty law and stuff. So we have a different type of occupation. But Germany's is much more flagrant, and whether it's right or wrong is beside the point, and I'm not
Right.
advocating the right or wrongness. I'm just saying things aren't the way they seem, and many people don't even know that Germany funds the state of Israel. It's through war reparations. Again, I'm not passing judgment on this, but there's a lot of Germans that don't like it. It's all the Weimar Republic sort of, that they feel that they've been had. And I'm not taking up that cause for them, but I'm just saying is a lot of people don't know that there's a lot of upset in Germany, particularly with the younger people, or either they say, well, this isn't the way it should be. Now, whether it should be that way or not is a lot more stuff
complicated,
that gets all this Zionist and Semitic intrigue, which I really don't care to go into because it's very complicated, and it serves people's agendas. But there's so much about even the deaths of all the different people, from Göring to Hitler. The Allies have lied about these people and their deaths. And there's recently information coming out from Germany about Hitler in Argentina, and it's taken a long time to come out. Some actual, real, live facts about what had taken place there, or presented as facts. I really don't. Most of it's in German. I can't, instead of like these wild stories you hear. I really don't know, but we haven't had a good job of honest reporting in the wake of the Third Reich, and a lot of it has to do with the technology, the whole technology, and that the Americans wanted the technology. The Germans were given, or the Russians were given Berlin, which was the prize, but the real prize was the technology with Werner von Braun and all that Operation Paperclip stuff.
And that's really kind of where I want to come back to. I want to swing back to that technology, to the reverse engineering of the flying discs and things like that. Now, obviously, that must have entailed some kind of ET contact with I guess you said the Vril group and extraterrestrials, I would suppose.
The Vril group, yes, it according to the history that I've spoken to people over there that are in the best position to know, is that the technology didn't really come from aliens. It came from the Vril Society, which was Carl Hausover, had at least 3 women and probably more. And these women were transmediums, and they would literally channel information. Now, whether that's coming from an ET or not,
okay,
is a question.
Right.
So they were translating and giving specs on how to build UFOs. And these would be given to the German engineers to build, and then they would experiment with them. And this was the Vril craft. Rudolf Hess used to lecture. He was very technologically savvy. And this is what they were doing in the 20s. And it carried forward in the 30s. It didn't get as much funding as when the war started because these things were not refined to the point where they were good for warfare. So there was more interest in conventional war weapons like panzer tanks. And but these were like transmediums, women with very long hair who tended to be very beautiful as well. They're rather mysterious, and we don't know that much about them, except that they definitely did exist. Mm-hmm. They definitely were the impetus for this technology.
And at that particular point in time, the United States had not progressed that far in terms of engineering any kind of, flying craft.
I don't know what the United States had done and had not done at that time. I really don't know. So it would seem. So it would seem.
Let me just throw this out, actually, because the question's in the corner of my mind, and you're probably one of the few people that could answer. Tell me what you think about this. And then we'll get back to the topic. But have you heard about the British landing on the moon in the latter part of the 19th century? Have you heard about that?
No. I've never heard a word about that.
Okay, I'm just curious. Yeah, because I can't remember the source now, and where I heard that. But well, no, I thought I heard Al Bielek say that in an interview. Maybe that was not him.
I don't know.
But
I mean,
yeah,
he says a lot of wild things. It doesn't mean they're true. Doesn't mean they're not true either. But I've never heard. I know Jules Verne wrote about the moon, and Jules Verne was a member of a secret society.
hmm,
And he wrote about Journey to the Center of the Earth. He wrote
right,
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He was ahead of his time. And it's, maybe these secret society people had, it's possible the Knights Templars had devices, and it's possible secret societies had devices. One of the things about the Templars is they had a lot of alchemical history and models that you'll sometimes see replicas of them in movies, but there's a whole lot of what you call bells and whistles that taught astrology, which was what astronomy was called then. It taught esoteric secrets and might well have included data about the center of the Earth or off-planet things, or even, literally crystal balls, or that could literally manifest stuff, what the Templars had. And the Vatican would have confiscated all that wasn't, hidden, that remained hidden. Some of it's remained hidden, and the Vatican doesn't talk about it.
right.
So there might well be some remarkable things that had happened in those time periods, because people will say, well, we know that they didn't have anything in the 1800s.
Right.
Well, you got to remember, time travel has now been established as scientifically plausible, possible,
Hmm.
and if time travel is plausible and possible, and is going to be discovered in the future, all bets are open, because you can obviously, if you can travel in the future can travel back into history. So anything could have happened, and those secret societies would be key points of interest with regard to anything. But as for the British going to the moon, no, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. I was just curious about that and what you would have thought. But what I'm getting is that you're saying that technically they may well have been able to have done that, whether or not they actually did it or not.
Well, I don't know about them, but somebody technically in the future could go back into that past, and it's plausible, but I have no.
Okay. Let me ask you this question: Since do you think there's a lot of that going on right now? A lot of future back into the past, manipulating and maybe changing the course of events that people may not even be aware of at all. Do you think that's happening?
According to David Anderson, he says it's a very dangerous development. People sending drones into the past. India sends drones into the past, and drones are one of the most latest and greatest technologies. Jet Propulsion Laboratory has been big on drones lately. And these drones are going to replace UFOs, because, who needs spaceships with aliens if you can have drones, you see?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it begs the question, well, why do they have these aliens in spaceships if we can have drones do it? Because these aliens are often portrayed as kind of robotic and not very human. So it's kind of like send a drone. So all of a sudden you're getting this weird this realization that, well, if America's building drones, and drones can all these wonderful things out of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, why couldn't aliens do drones? Okay? Why do aliens need weird-looking grays or whatever they put in them? Why can't they do drones if they're most advanced? It begs the question, is what's going on here in this flow movement? Now, anything's possible, but drones are a lot more efficient. Drones can do things. There's no loss of life, there's no person to torture and get information from, why not a drone? And this begs the question is, what is going on here? Were there even aliens in the first place? Because the aliens are a great thing that makes everybody get the heebie-jeebies, but a drone is much more effective. So, you know, are the people in the Jet Propulsion Laboratory smarter than the aliens? Or are they the aliens? But everything is moving towards the drone.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, well, let me just say this also to the folks that are listening and in the chat room. We're open for questions if you want to call in. If you don't see the number, it's 877-572-4270. If you're in the chat room and you want to, you have a question or something for Peter or a comment, observation, feel free to go ahead and write that down. My producer will make sure that I get it. All right, now, so are you saying, Peter, that it's a possibility that drones are coming to us from the future? Is that, I'm not sure exactly what the...
Well, I'm just saying is that David Anderson said that drones have been sent into the past by India, the nation of India.
Oh, that they have sent drones into the past.
Yeah, they have very developed time control technology in India. They're the most advanced country in the world in terms of time control.
Okay, that's really ridiculously fascinating. My God. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
they have a big place near Mumbai, which is formerly known as Bombay, and this is what he says. And so, I mean, drones, I mean, this subject came up about sending videos in, you know, to videograph the time. You know, I said, can you shoot cameras into these time portals you've developed? And he says, well, there's a problem with the barrier zone, so he says the most effective way is to send in a drone. And he says there's problems with sending in, changing the past. He says if you change the past, you've kind of changed it forever. And it deals with complex issues and moral issues. And this is one of the reasons he's been coming forth with expose on time control technology. As for what's really taken place, I couldn't tell you. One experiment that he did with plants was that if you had plants that were related to each other, sister plants or grandfather plants, and you killed the grandfather, if you went back in time and killed the grandfather, the DNA of the related plants would change. How it changed, I don't know. But the DNA was changed. The plants were still there, but the DNA was changed. Which just begs more questions than it gives answers. But in other words, it affected the timeline of the plants that got there somehow.
Right. Well, I would also hope, at least in my own thinking, that there's some kind of still universal law that's in place, some timekeeper or something that you just can't just go willy-nilly and start changing the past. I hope it's not, that random,
Well, you have to look at it. It's very interesting because if those plants were the one plant was killed, you might say, well, how did those plants get there in the first place? Well, they probably, whoever got those plants and wherever they came from had to find another plant instead of the one that was killed. So they had to find another plant, and that's probably why they had a different DNA. But it's also, so he's very concerned about this timelines being changed. Now, one of the first things Preston Nichols taught me about Montauk and time is that when time is changed, that existing timeline that was changed still exists. You've created a new timeline. So you have an infinite possibility of timelines. And so you don't really ever erase a timeline. Now, this could be in terms of like a hard disk on a computer. When that information is still there, if you know how to go back and reconfigure it. You can lose it's kind of like information on a computer. Because look, there is a record of everything that takes place here, and it can be recreated. So it's all how it has a lot more to do with philosophy and the pragmatic circumstances. I mean, people are more concerned with the pragmatic circumstances than the philosophy. The more advanced the philosophy is, you know, the more pragmatic alternatives you have.
Okay, let me ask you this: have you heard of a John Titor time traveler?
Yes, I have.
Somebody in our chat room is interested in hearing you talk about that a little bit.
John Titor is a fabrication. It's by about 3 guys, and they put together this plausible idea. It's sort of an internet stunt. And it really captured a lot of people's attention. And I know one of the men who was consulted because of his far-reaching ability to interpret things. Joseph Matheny, he's one of my co-authors, Long's Half the Beginning. And Joe participated in the hoax and remained silent because he'd agreed to remain silent, and then somebody was trying to raise money down in Florida and saying, you know, let's bring John Titor home, and was actually collecting money in the name of John Titor. At that point, he said, he called his you know, collaborators and said, this can't go on, and he exposed his role in it.
What was the purpose of that anyway? What would have been the purpose of the whole hoax?
I don't know. I mean, they asked him to participate in it, but I don't know. I think, you know, there's a lot of things that get done by people to see how people react. You know, like
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like was that Orson Welles broadcast of War in the Worlds? You know,
right.
Was intelligence operative. A lot of experimental things have been done on the internet to get the sociological reaction of people. It's not necessarily by government or university. Some people are just curious. Joe himself had put out this thing on the 4P Lodge, which is the extension of the Process Lodge or whatever, the Church of the Final Judgment, which was supposedly tied to a lot of murders. And he put up this thing on the internet, and all he didn't do a big campaign. He put it on a link on a Wikipedia, and he got all sorts of people writing to him and saying they wanted to be serial killers. They wanted to learn how to do serial killing. He got all sorts of outrageous email of crazy. He was by people who wanted to learn how to do serial killing. And, you know, it just showed what a puzzling lot humanity can be.
Without a doubt. He
wasn't telling them how to do serial killing. He just made all these assertions about this imaginary extension of this satanic lodge, and he got a lot of interest from different quarters.
Let's go back to Preston for a minute. Now, when you first met him, he didn't realize that he had any connection at all with Montauk. Now, he eventually found that...
That's not accurate. No.
Okay.
No, by the time I met him, he knew all about Montauk.
He did know.
I just was the one that wrote the story down.
Okay.
But there was a point when he didn't know that he was connected to Montauk.
So he was actually living 2 lives at one time.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. Because I know it's funny because when I read that, I realized that on television recently there had been a show that they were trying to promote about a guy that, and I don't know whether or not he knew it or not, but he was living the double life. He had the wife and the kid and everything, but then he was like a secret agent or something, some kind of, and I don't know whether it was like a mind control thing. I think it was starring Christian Slater. So that at one particular point in time, he was, he had these 2 lives going on in this one reality. And I don't know if he was aware of his, of the 2 of them or not. I think the whole premise was that he was not aware of the 2 of them, which I found really interesting. But now Preston is definitely a proponent of the whole time travel thing, the Philadelphia experiment and the resulting Project Rainbow, I believe.
Oh, yeah, he's experienced it, time travel, and he's had, of course, so much of the information from first-hand or second-hand sources and some of the equipment. No, this is it's right down his alley.
I guess I want to go a little bit. I want to talk just a little bit about Duncan Cameron and was it Al Bielek or Bielek?
Al Bielek is how you say it.
Al Bielek, yeah, Al Bielek. Just a little bit about them. Is Al still around? Is he still on the talking circuit? Is he still?
No, Al is not. He's around, but he's. Last I knew, he was in California. He'd suffered a stroke, and he was not. He couldn't even talk. Last conversation I had, he couldn't talk and be audible. So he kind of gave up calling me, and last I knew he was in California in some sort of managed care.
Okay. And is Duncan Cameron still around?
He's still around, but he's kind of disassociated himself from Montauk and that sort of thing. He keeps in touch with Preston. He's okay physically and all that, but he's just basically doing his regular work.
Do you think there's anything still going on out at Montauk or not?
Yeah, I think there's things still going on at Montauk. What it is, I couldn't tell you. The base has now been, since we wrote Pyramids of Montauk and exposed the fact that it was a state park, they've turned it into a state park, and anybody can go there and visit Camp Hero, which you couldn't do that before. You'd be chased off by very angry state park workers. Now the state park workers are friendly, and you can go there. But you will sometimes see strange things there. It was about 5 or 6 years ago, I saw mutilated deer right near the transmitter tower. So, it's a strange place. It'll always be a strange place. And the underground facilities there are not, they go very deep under the underground. So it's not your typical, it's not the bunkers of Camp Hero. It's far below that. So I really couldn't tell you what's going on, but I would think very much strange things are going on. The Army did one of the PSYOPs departments of the Army went out there and did a little drill. Didn't seem to amount to much, and I don't know if it had anything to do with the Montauk Project, but it was the PSYOPs division went out there and were playing around a couple years ago.
Have you seen the pictures on the internet, the whole Montauk monster thing? Have you been aware of any of all of the mutilated carcasses? And do you think those are hoaxes, or do you feel like there's something to that?
No, they're not hoaxes. They are a creature that was washed up. I spent time on Plum Island and saw the director explain it away. He was obsessed with explaining it away because people were asking him if it was from Plum Island, Mm-hmm. So he did a lot of explaining that it was a dog. I don't believe it was a dog. There have been 3 of those monsters that have washed up. One washed up at Montauk, and I knew a lady who knew the lady whose property or beach it dug. She was the one to discover it. And then there was another one in, I think, Ontario, that there was in a paper, and another one in Center Island, on the North Shore of Long Island. So there are 3 of these monsters, and in each case, somebody comes and takes the carcass and runs off with it. See, this is what's peculiar. So the carcass is not there to examine. Somebody takes it at an early stage of the reporting, and it disappears. See, this is one of the problems. There's nobody there signed to say, hey, let's look at this and examine it. Nobody's doing it in the public interest. Somebody comes and gets it and confiscates it. Therefore, it's suspicious. A lot of people think it's Plum Island. I was at Plum Island the summer before this one, and you can't go anywhere on Plum Island, even if you're an employee, without somebody going with you. And there's so many nooks and crannies on that island. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen in the world. And they're spending, I think it's got a budget of $365 million, something like that, per year. And they're building new buildings out there. At the same time, they're saying it's going to be sold. It's going to be sold, and they're going to move it to Kansas. So Plum Island, I don't know that those were those Montauk monster comes from. It could, but I don't really know.
Well, and I don't know if I got this from one of Swerdlow's books or not, but I know that you had mentioned that the project closed down. Oh, this is something I really want to talk to, actually. We'll get around to the project closing down for a minute. But let's talk about either from out of Brookhaven Lab or out of Montauk, mind acceleration devices being used on the population. Is there do you have any understanding of any of that occurring out on Long Island, say during the period of time that the Montauk Project was in operation?
Well, there were several reports of people because, that transmitter was sending out electromagnetic pulses. Okay, that's a fact. It would mess up people's TV sets and whatnot. But radio frequencies affect the moods of human beings and of animal life. There's several reports of animals acting strange in the town. Deer running into a phone booth. Deer crashing into a window of Salivar's. For years, Salivar's had a mural on its window of a deer crashing into it because of what had happened. And, so there was irregular animal behavior. We have videos in the 1990s of them having radar out at Montauk Point. And birds flying in swarms and then just landing on telephone wire and not moving one iota. Me throwing rocks. The only birds that would move were the ones that actually came so close to the rocks, like two. The rest of the birds would stay still instead of scattering. So we have this on video, strange animal behavior.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually asking that because I was out in Long Island, as I told you. I don't know how far all of that reaches, but I was out during around the 1979 period, and I have to tell you, my most life-changing event occurred on Long Island in terms of, I don't know, esoteric, metaphysical, or whatever, and it wasn't until after I read your books that I'm like, I'm wondering if, if all of this occurred because of something that was, being, some kind of frequencies that were being broadcast that opened up my consciousness like that. So that's actually kind of why.
Yes, that can happen. But let me ask you a question. You were down at the protest in Manhattan. I didn't even know about those till last week, and I keep the MSNBC financial channel on a great part of the day, and I didn't even know about them. I mean, but the point of it is do you see any choppers flying around? Do you see anything? I mean, they can control the moods of those people. They have mood control technology. They can beam frequencies into those crowds. They can make them violent. They can make them happy. And I just wondered if you'd seen any evidence of anything like that in the form. They don't tend to use black helicopters anymore for that. I think they've changed how they do it. But I just wondered, this is prime. They're prime bait for mood control altering. And it makes you even wonder, what is the real motivation of those people being there? Is it all a ploy in the first place? I don't really know. I mean, it's nice to think that people are revolting against the problems in the world. But if you go back into the 60s and study Tavistock, you see that much of the 60s, where people thought they were being so original, a lot of it was orchestrated.
I know that's true, and some of it I'm sure is applicable here. And I will tell you this, I will keep an eye out for those helicopters. I did know that the day that they had the protest at Union Square where the girls were maced, pinned and maced, that there were helicopters that were flying above. I was aware of that. And I was aware of a very loud helicopter this morning that was really, really obtrusive in its noise. But I'm not, this morning I wasn't, quite a distance from where the protests are taking place. But I'll keep an eye open on that, actually.
But they don't really need the copters today. They can do other things. And they've got, all sorts of underground stuff they can roll out the tanks in New York City, too. They don't really tell you that, that they've got, U.S. Army installations that can just come up, or National Guard installations. that can come out of nowhere. I don't know where they're at, but they can roll out the tanks and mow those people down if they so wanted to. I don't think they want to do that.
No, they don't. Yeah, especially in that part of town. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing they'll do is they'll stand in agitators to do violence that are actually police personnel, and so that they can come and bring violence down on the crowd justifiably.
Right, and some of that has already, I think, occurred. And we have another question actually from the chat room, and this is really about the beast that escaped from the time tunnel. I'm assuming that's what it is. The question actually says they want to know about the supposed alien creature that escaped from the time tunnel and killed technicians, and the creation of the Captain America type metahuman project.
I don't know what he's talking about, the metahuman project, but I mean the beast is something that was, according to the story, was a manifestation of Duncan Cameron's thoughts. It was a amplified thought form, and it was amplified so as to literally scare everybody and shut the project down. I didn't get the metahuman question though.
Well, maybe that has to do with the super soldiers that the super soldiers that are being trained or are being created by, I guess, the Black Ops, and maybe that's what that has to do with, and whether or not there were any super soldiers or anything that you heard involved with with the project.
Well, the super soldier concept comes later than the Montauk stuff. I mean, sure, they were trying to have, top soldiers, but more of that super soldier stuff is kind of the latter day, what the Montauk Project morphed into. It's some of the technology, became the Heart Project, and then you have the super soldiers. That's kind of it's a thread. It's a valid thread, but that's not from the traditional time period.
Okay, because I know that Swerdlow talks about involvement in rituals out in Montauk, and I think that Kathy O'Brien mentions Montauk. I think maybe in some of her work in terms of some of what was going on out there ritualistically. Did you get any of that at all? And well, you must have, because you edited a couple.
I don't really have any significant reports of rituals. Let Kathy and Stuart speak for themselves. It's not really something that I've. There's tons of people that have told tons of things.
Right.
Stories, and that may or may not be true. And but I can't speak for their stories or the other stories, because most of those stories aren't verifiable. Although, I would definitely say that Kathy and Stuart have been part of very dark rituals and dark mind control operations for sure, as have many of the other people that assert these stories. One of the problems is the stories. You can't pin them down. You can't verify them, and so the psychiatric community has put forth the false memory syndrome,
right?
Which is to basically try and neutralize the actual satanic ritual abuse. See, some of it's not accurate, but if you were ritually abused, satanically or otherwise, you might not have a good, accurate memory of it. This is one of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
The people trying to dismiss it, and the people who've had these experiences should be acknowledged as having experienced something.
Right.
It's their experience, and their experience should not be denied, even if it's inaccurate. It may be accurate, it may not be, but if they felt something happened, something obviously happened to them. What it is a
Is that what you feel about the blood of Christ on Mars? Because boy, did that one really blow my mind. Stan Campbell going back, or Stewart now, of course, going back into time and attempting to assassinate Christ, and Christ telling him, "Well, it's not your time, and it's not his time," but still managing to get the vial of blood and go through the vortex, end up on Mars to give it to Duncan. that's about as far out there as one can get.
It's a fascinating story. When I first heard the story, it was with a group of us in a building on Long Island, and Preston's telling this story about Stuart. I had not met Stuart. I didn't meet Stuart until he got out of prison. But Preston is telling this incredible story, and I'm thinking like, wow, all the Christmas tree lights are going on. And it's like, wow, what a story. And when I talked to Preston about that after, I said, I don't know if that story is true, but you deserve an A+ for creativity. And he says, it's not my story. And that, it was told by Stuart under regression, under very deep regression. So this was coming out of his deeper layers of his mind. And it's a very creative story. It's very archetypal. In other words, it's taking on the basic mythos of problems of God and humanity, and in this case, it was going back to get the blood of Christ to put it into the Antichrist in the personage of Duncan Cameron, who was groomed to be the Antichrist.
Right.
And of course, it backfired because the blood of Christ was neutralized it, and that impelled Duncan to cancel the project.
Right.
Gotten out of hand. It's like, so supposedly Christ to the rescue. Now, I mean, whether it's true or not, it's a great story. And sometimes when things do get out of balance, you do have a counterbalance. Montauk was a very negative place, and Preston had always said that they were always monkeying with the Christ and Antichrist energies at Montauk. So this was very Montaukian in the purest sense of the word, what he came up with. And the Christ is a polarizing figure. Christ is polarizing, as is the Antichrist. Because and of course this whole story about Revelations is about the ultimate polarization, the war in the heavens. It's polarizing. And when you practice Taoist Qigong like I do, you don't want to be on either side of the poles. You want to be in the center. You want to be centered in stillness. And I would say that maybe the love of the Christ might put you in that center, neutralizing that. But But the Christ character is very polarizing. He was polarizing in the Bible, and because people couldn't accept him. So Stuart's story is a fascinating story.
Did you say that it was corroborated by Duncan Cameron, though?
I don't know if Duncan corroborated it. I don't know. Okay. I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah. It's just so, such an amazing thing. I mean, look, in my mind, it's like this. If people can travel back in time and there's no restrictions on what they can do, and they discovered time travel and there's a cabal and they're trying to control things, it doesn't seem implausible that they wouldn't take that tactic. I'm not saying...
The Christ story... and there's scholarship by Ralph Ellis, King Jesus, the book, shows that the scholarship shows that the story isn't necessarily the way we've been told it historically. There's a lot of holes in it historically, and he goes into the actual dilemma. But be that as it may, if somebody's monkeying with time, they're going to go to points like that for Christ or a similar character because he represents the equalizer. He represents a key point of power, at least in the thoughts of human beings. So, they're going to monkey with the trigger points. Christ is a trigger point in history. And you just look at all the things that have been lied about in the story. So, it's a trigger point. People are going to go after the trigger points. And at Montauk, it was a big trigger point. It creates a lot of toxicity, a lot of fallout. And I think if you accept a Christian philosophy, you might say that Christ is the equalizer, the neutralizer of the whole dilemma of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, it kind of brings us back into reconciliation with creation or the
Mm-hmm.
creator.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what we're dealing with, is a lost connection to the creator. We don't actually, we aren't lost. We are still connected to the creator, but we're talking about a more reconcilable existence. So, and the Antichrist would be sort of the opposite of that. You know, you're in rebellion against the creator. Whatever. It's so these things are going to come up, whether they're, you know, whether the Christianity is true or not becomes beside the point, because it's very representative of what, you know, Montauk is trying to solve the problems of the universe or aggravate them, one or the other.
Right. Right. Now, we're almost running out of time, but there's a couple of things I just wanted to, well, we've actually run out, but we've got a few minutes, and I want to just touch on a couple of things quickly before we go. But first, I want to say, I want to give them your website, again, which is Sky Books, right? BOOKS.
That's correct.
USA, yeah.
USA.com, skybooks.usa.com.
Yeah, and you folks, I mean, I know you folks that are listening, I mean, this is all really fascinating. It's mind expanding. It opens up our eyes to what the possibilities are. A lot of the stuff that Peter's saying, other writers have touched on here, there, and everywhere. Obviously, you know, you're going to get different perceptions, and somebody's going to go deeper on one end or whatever. But what all it does is just really opens up our minds to understanding that the world we live in, the reality we think we're seeing with our eyes, is far more complex. Peter, briefly, and two things, and then you can take them in and you can just sort of, you know, talk about them just a little bit. One thing I just kind of don't want to let you get away without talking about is the fact that you said there were like 12 different major mystery schools on the planet that are attempting to control the morphogenetic grid. Are these groups, are they cooperating together? Are they working opposite each other? Are they sort of cooperating, working out? Can you get into that a little bit? And then after that, just talk a little bit about the Indians, and then we can call it a night.
Well, the rank and file of your mystery schools aren't really going to know much about anything. It's like a lower-level priest in a Catholic church. You know, he doesn't know what the Vatican's plotting, other than what they tell him they're plotting. So, you know, the mystery school initiate, you know, like say the Rosicrucians. Rosicrucians do a lot of mail-order recruiting, and as one of my friends who was in the order said, there's nothing more despicable than a lower level than a mail-order Rosicrucian. That's how the higher-ups would look at it. But that's how they get their dues and support. And the Rosicrucian place out in San Jose, that had a lot of mysterious characters operating through it that might have been part of the executive structure, but they weren't part of the rank and file Rosicrucians. You see, so when you have a secret society, you have people who can move in and out of that secret society who may or may not be a part of that secret society. What they do have is control of that secret society. So it's just like communist cell groups. Communists would have cells. In other words, you'd be part of a cell, but you wouldn't know who the higher cell is. They don't tell you. You have one representative who would know, and he would not know who the cell is above them. You see, it's all mysterious. So you have people operating in secrecy. It doesn't matter what the group is. It could be Democrats or Republicans. But there's certain people that can access this group, given instructions, and direct it, just like the Freemasons. Freemasons sign oaths. They have loyalty oaths. You know, if you were a Freemason and you had a loyalty oath, and you were taken into a room and given secret signs by somebody you didn't know, and convinced you he was a Mason, he may not even be part of the lodge. The other lodge members may not even know, who he is, or that this even occurred. And this person could go off and do some deed for Freemasonry, good or bad. It's like when you subscribe to secrecy, you are vulnerable you're vulnerable to the occult because the occult is hidden. You can't see it.
Okay. But you did mention that these groups are vying or something of that order, that these groups are vying to control the actual morphogenetic grid of the planet, or trying to get control of the planet amongst themselves.
It's no different than the different baseball teams trying to stockpile the best baseball players to win the World Series. It's they're each trying to get their name on the GE College Bowl.
Okay.
Just, yeah.
Talk a little bit about the Indians for just a quick minute, about the Montauk Indians and their plight and what's going on with them out on Montauk.
Well, the Montauk Indians were declared extinct in 1909, and their land was used for these experiments in time. And the land that Camp Hero rests on, where the Montauk Air Force Station was and is, it's not really an Air Force station anymore, but that was deeded from the government, United States government, to the state of New York with the right to take it back anytime they want. And it's a quitclaim deed. We haven't seen the original deed. The original deed would probably show some chicanery. And so we really don't know. Now, the Indians were moved out of the way. They were trying to move them away for hundreds of years to get them off that land. The Montauk Indians are not recognized. They were declared extinct by New York State, even though they were not extinct and they were there. And this is one of the hottest issues in Indian law, but they still don't recognize them. And the Montauk Indians have the best genealogical records of any Indian tribe. So it's quite a conundrum for them, and they don't get much cooperation, because if they were recognized, it would kind of put Indian law and Indian truth back on the map. And this is unfortunate, because the Bureau of Indian Affairs is probably one of the most corrupt bureaus in our nation. But it's like we're living in a time when stuff is so, it's kind of like injustices. I mean, if you say one word about the injustice of against Israel, people go all ape. But you have nothing about the injustices of the Montauk Indians, of the Moors, of the indigenous Moors of America, and a lot of other people. In other words, it's, because, listen, whether you're for Israel or against it, Israel is a very powerful nation. It's got a lot of powerful connections, a lot of powerful money. They can buy their righteousness and get it listened to and get it declared politically correct. Other groups, and I'm not saying that they didn't have injustices committed against them.
I hear you.
But you have groups with no money or little money, like the Moors or the Montauk Indians. And, so it's like, no, it's a question of power. It's a question of who has power. And this is really what we're dealing with. It's just the age-old dilemma of that who holds the most money controls the game.
Well, one of the things that I just want to mention before, as I wrap this up with you, is that even in terms of the Indians, and this is something I think you touch on in your book, Pyramids of Montauk, you touch on the sacredness of the ground, the pyramids that were there, the connection of the Indians to perhaps the Egyptians, because they seem to, many of them, used Pharaoh somehow in their name, David Pharaoh, Wyandanch Pharaoh, and I think that's really fascinating, and I do believe you touch on some of that in one of your books, right?
That's correct. The name of the royal tribe of the Montauks were the royal tribe of Long Island, and their name were the Pharaohs, and the Pharaohs came from Egypt, and this is their tradition. So it ties them, directly back to the Great Pyramid. And Ralph Ellis, who I mentioned before, he's written a book called Jesus, Last of the Pharaohs, which shows that the Jewish hierarchy and the Egyptian hierarchy were one and the same. History has been convoluted to separate them.
Right.
And a lot can be said about that, even stuff he doesn't know about that corroborates that. But so the Montauk Indians have a very important legacy in all of this, and they're it's a grave injustice that has been done. I befriended them for a very long time, but it's like literally pissing into the wind to try and do anything to get significant help, because people have their own agendas, and what their agenda is not helping these people or even helping the truth get recognized for what it is.
Right. Well, all you could do is really put it out there, because if you had not put it out there, I wouldn't even really consider all of that. And just that bit of knowledge right there is really helpful for me, and I think for the people that are listening. I would urge our listeners to get to skybooksusa.com, scroll down through the books that Peter has to offer, and, go for a ride, go for the adventure, and find out more about this complex reality that we live in. Peter, I want to thank you very much for being on our show. I really enjoyed talking to you, man. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. It was nice to be here.
And just hold on to the other side when I cancel the show, and I'll just say goodbye to you in person. I just want to thank you folks for tuning in. Wish you guys a good week. Next week, we're going to run an archive show with Richard Dolan. I'm going to be doing my first public speaking experience on Long Island, by the way, so I'm really excited about that. And I want to remind you to follow us on Twitter or go to Facebook, look for The Bright Side Media Publishing. Please come to that page and like it. If you like the icon here on Blog Talk Radio, it does not go to the page. So I like to know that you liked it personally. I'd really appreciate it. We're going to be back on the 23rd, I believe, with Ed Grimsley. We're going to be talking about UFOs, night vision, some of the things that he's seen. And so I'm really looking forward to that conversation. I want to thank you folks again for tuning in on behalf of myself and the producer, Curtis Lees, and, of course, our guest this evening, Peter Moon. And I'm going to let the music take you out.